right, Ro, how's it going, man? Welcome to Iblis Manifestations, or shall I call you bestial aggressor of morbid invocations for the rest of the episode?
Bro, it's fine.
Yeah, excellent, man. Awesome. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Midweek, bit of a hump day, but
Yeah, sure. No, I feel that, man. It's been the same for me as well. So tell me, you recently did a show with Adorior in Romania. So first of all, how was that? Tell me a little bit about the event.
It's a really cool festival called Old Grave Festival. I've played it in the past with Grave Miasma and Destroyer, but it's a really well organized, really well run festival, basically in Bucharest. The show went down really well. We're playing with some great bands like Satan and Black Oath, etc. Sound was fucking awesome. Crowd were good, and we really enjoyed ourselves. It was actually tight for once.
Right, that's cool, man. Yeah, awesome. I mean, I've only just seen you for the first time with Adorior back in July, where you performed that show with Sadistic Intent and Sigyn, which was a fucking killer lineup. Great show. But I also understand that the sort of the chaotic nature of things that can go along with it as well, whether it's to do with the sound or certain things, and especially at a festival, it's rarely that it can be perfect, but sounds like this one was a solid night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the organizers were great. They really took care of us, and it just went down really well. Had a really good vibe, and we could hear each other on stage. Well, I could anyway. So there wasn't
That's impressive.
That problem of complete chaos and noise. It was actually fairly coherent as far as Adorior goes.
Sounds awesome, man. Yeah. Well, first of all, obviously, I don't know if you recall this, but the very first time that we actually met, I think, we had met in passing, but the first time you and I properly spoke was back in December 2019, 8th of December 2019, which landed on a Sunday. We were performing at the Temple of Boom in Leeds. I think you were doing one of your last shows, if not your last show, with Grave Miasma that night. I think it was the Cosmic Terror Festival. I don't know if you recall that one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember it very well. I think all of us were a bit sick at the time, but I was very excited about it, despite having a cold or whatever. It was cool. It was sort of bittersweet. It wasn't an easy decision, to quit all the bands at the time, but, had to be done.
Yeah. So, obviously at the time, you were doing quite a lot as well. And this was actually just before the pandemic happened. This is actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously you had been playing with Grave Miasma since the, I think around early mid 2000s. Actually, no, 2006. Am I right? Was that the year?
Man, my memory's terrible, but
yeah,
a long time, since the beginning, basically, whenever that was.
So basically around like 10, 15 years, since like the inception of the band, you'd been playing with them, and you'd been playing with Destroyer for, I think, maybe about 7, 8 years by that point.
Yeah, I think I joined Destroyer in 2012 or 13, somewhere around.
Okay, sure. So with this being the end of 2019, then obviously I'm glad that, first of all, I got to see you with both of those bands. I mean, I'd seen you with Destroyer multiple times prior to this, but I'm glad that I got to see you before you departed from them. But these are obviously, killer fucking bands. Great reputation, and you seem to be doing a lot at the time as well. Obviously, Destroyer did the tour with Dead Congregation, Nocturnal Graves, and our very good friends in Caduceus Lux Lucius. And you were also doing a fair amount with Grave Miasma. So what actually prompted you to want to step away from that, because this was just before the pandemic as well, you know. So you personally decided to step away from all of this and playing the shows and stuff, and then obviously a couple of months later, everyone else around the world coincidentally had to do the same thing, perhaps not by choice. But I'm just curious as to what prompted you to go down that path at the time.
I think over the years of playing in bands, it gave me loads of opportunities to basically travel the world and see a lot of places I wouldn't otherwise see. So it was an awesome, ride, really cool opportunity that I took advantage of. And, just playing with great people and having that chemistry on stage was awesome over the years. But I just reached a point where I think I just wasn't enjoying it as much as I should have been. And I was perhaps taking things for granted, especially, the traveling aspect. It became, in some instances, a bit like a chore, a bit like, oh, fucking hell, I have to go to this place or that place. And then it dawned on me that, I should be appreciating this. It's an opportunity many people would kill for. And so I started questioning why I had this sort of empty feeling that was building up. And I guess after a few, medicine ceremonies, I started getting some answers and started realizing that I should perhaps move away from that life for a bit, or for the foreseeable future at the time, and pursue a bit more personal development.
That's completely understandable, man. I mean, there's so much that goes with being a part of a band or multiple bands at that. It's not a lifestyle that is for everyone, and even let's say you are capable of the lifestyle, there's still many other things that come with the territory, I think, at least. And I think that whilst it is, of course, very, very rewarding to do it, it is also extremely draining, unlike anything that you could explain to a normal person. I think that just as much as it can be absolutely ecstatic to be on stage around people that you care about and respect and be performing for an audience who actually appreciate what it is that you're performing for them. Some have traveled from afar. You've traveled from afar just to be able to be there at that moment and perform for them. It's a big deal. It's a great thing. But at the same time, there's a lot of pressure. And like you said, there's a lot of labor that goes into it, that can just be fucking draining. I mean, you see that happen with a lot of people. And I feel like not a lot of musicians really talk about that aspect of it, because there's just so much that goes into being a musician. You think it's just about being good at playing your instrument. Like, fuck no, that's like 0.5% of the whole thing, even though it helps obviously when bands don't sound like shit. But I think that there's a lot that goes in there. So I mean, before anything, I can only offer understanding at the very least, if you had reached such a conclusion. And I also, one thing I can definitely respect about the decision is the fact that you obviously did it out of honesty, I mean, because you wouldn't want to do it if you don't enjoy it. So it's not a synthetic experience. It's a completely organic thing that you are trying to create. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to go out on a high note with all this. And when I made the decision to leave, it was actually about a year in advance. And I wanted my final year to be a fucking killer year and a year that I'd really enjoy. And I did enjoy it. I had some great shows, man. And yeah, it was because I knew that was the final year. I had to give it everything. So it kind of reignited the fire that was missing, I guess, a bit in myself. But once it was done, it was a bit of a relief, to be honest. Because as you say, it can be draining, and also getting priorities in order. It's not an easy thing. We all have lives back home, shit going on back home, got to make ends meet and all that kind of stuff. Also, we might have goals outside of music. I certainly do and did at the time. So, yeah, I just had to reshuffle my priorities, really. And, get used to life without being in a band. Because, I mean, I guess I was in bands for 18 years or something. Crazy.
That's a very long time, man, and especially to be doing it at the level of intensity in which you were doing it, or at least are doing it again now. What were some of those conversations like? Considering
very easy, man.
Yeah.
You know, both bands I spoke to were very understanding. There was no argument, no bullshit, no bad feelings, no hurt feelings, nothing. So yeah, simple as that, really. Very straightforward.
It's awesome to hear, man. Again, I think that's a testament to just simply actually wanting to perform this art form for honest reasons, and treating it as a pure form of expression rather than I'm in a band, so I'm supposed to do this, so then I guess I'll go on stage and perform. You know what I mean? Like, fuck that way of thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there were a few shows like that sometimes when I'd go on stage and I wouldn't actually feel anything. That might have been because I'd taken something, but regardless of that, just no fucking chemistry, just a numbness, man. And I hate that. That's not how it should be, really. So I had a few shows like that where I just felt nothing. I felt empty, and I sort of started questioning that. And I got some answers, really. They weren't necessarily comfortable answers or answers that I wanted to hear, but I had to accept them and I had to do it.
You mentioned earlier that you read some of these answers through plant medicine. You called it. Could you delve into that a bit more? What is it specifically that you're referring to by plant medicine when you say that?
Well, I started exploring ayahuasca. That's the plant medicine in question. I refer to it as plant medicine, by the way, because I try and emphasize that it is a medicine. It's not a recreational drug. I mean, if you treated it like a recreational drug, it would destroy you.
Yeah.
I mean, it destroys you anyway, but you know what I mean.
And it destroys you in a good way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll take you apart and put you back together in so many words. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I've been interested in ayahuasca for a long time. Been reading up on it and reading up on DMT, listening to a lot of interviews and podcasts of people like Terence McKenna. And what was the other guy? His name will come to me. Graham Hancock.
Graham Hancock, yeah. Him and Terence, obviously, Terence McKenna, he died, I think, about maybe 20 years ago from now. But obviously, he has a vast majority of work which just speaks for itself. And I don't know if there'll be anyone who might only be hearing that name for the first time, but please, by all means, go and check out Terence McKenna's work. I think he wrote DMT, the Spirit Molecule. I think that was the name of his book.
That wasn't him. That was Rick Strassman.
Oh, was it? Okay, sure.
Rick Strassman, yeah.
Right, that's right. Yeah. Still, though, Terence McKenna, go check him out. I think his birthday is like a day after mine or something. But yeah, anyway. So
I always found his dialogue was always fascinating on the subject. He was more into psilocybin and mushrooms, but he did, touch upon ayahuasca quite a bit.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, what were sort of the conclusions that you took from this? So, obviously, initially you got exposed to, I guess, the knowledge and the intelligence that was out there about this particular psychedelic. I mean, just for anyone who's listening as well, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I've never tried ayahuasca, but I have tried DMT, as I've mentioned to you before. Ayahuasca is essentially the liquid form of DMT. I think it's mixed with a different type of plant which you can then ingest it rather than smoke it, and it lasts considerably longer amount of time. Is that a correct definition of the medicine?
Essentially, yeah. There are two components that go into the brew. One is the psychoactive substance, the actual DMT containing substance, and then the other substance is something called Hamala, which is I think it suppresses an enzyme in the stomach, which would otherwise break down the DMT and make the experience either not happen at all or last a lot shorter. So when you mix these two things together, it's quite a very skilled process. It's not something anyone can do. It takes a hell of a lot of work and practice to actually be able to create a brew. A lifetime of shamanic work, basically. So when these two things are brought together, it allows the person taking it to have a prolonged, interaction with DMT in a ceremonial sense. I wouldn't really recommend anyone doing this outside of a ceremonial setting at all.
No, I think you need someone looking after you. I mean, even for anyone who's not even heard of DMT or tried it, essentially, it is the single most powerful psychedelic experience that you could ever get. And it's basically, I think the trip itself, I think the peak of it lasts about 7 minutes, which is not a long time at all. Even though when you're in there, it feels like a lifetime. And then I think roughly about 12, 13 minutes is sort of the time where it actually almost completely wears off. But when you're in there, it's a different story.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, with DMT that you smoke, it's over very quickly, as you say. And that is something you can get away with doing without being in a ceremonial setting. It's still good to cleanse your space and do it in the right space. But with ayahuasca, it's the long haul. You're in there for 7 hours at least. Some people keep going and going.
But what are some of the effects? Like, let's say, how long does it take for ayahuasca to kick into your system? And what do you start even seeing? If there's any way you could perhaps even explain it, because I know that there's a lot of aspects of these particular type of psychedelics that a lot of people obviously talk about it being almost interdimensional, and that what you're seeing is, I could be wrong, but perhaps it could actually be beyond simple illusions and hallucinations, but rather just opening the portal within your mind to see things through a different scope, so that like reality is not just a 3D that's the 3D dimension that's defined around us, but rather that there is more to it. And a lot of people say that some of these psychedelics, I mean, you could also, I guess, relate this also to psilocybin and I guess maybe even LSD. So what are some of the things that you actually do see on ayahuasca, and how do you feel? Like, take me through the experience, if you can, in any way that you can actually fit into words, I guess.
Well, the first time I did it, it was a very welcoming group who had been, doing these ceremonies for quite a while. It was in England. I've always done it in England. I haven't actually gone to the Amazon. So maybe I'm missing something there. But the group I've done it with were awesome. They really took care of me. When getting there, I realized it was a sacred space. We were required to do certain things like have a cleansing shower beforehand. Make sure you're clean. Make sure your diet's really good before you go. When I say good, I don't necessarily mean this is a diet that you'd follow for the rest of your life. Definitely recommend against that. But I had to cut out basically all meat, all dairy, any inflammatory foods. Couldn't take any medicines or anything like that. So I had to really clean myself out and fast as well for as much as I could, which wasn't much. I think I fasted for a day. before doing ayahuasca.
I think it's something like 4 days where you have to stay off of meat, and you also got to be abstinent from sex as well, or any form of ejaculation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I think when it comes to this whole meat argument, you've got to realize in the Amazon, tribes do eat meat. They do eat fish. And although I haven't been there, I've heard that, you know, when they're preparing for ayahuasca, there might be a little bit of meat and fish before they do it. I think it might have been more of an ideology of the group I was doing it with to completely cut all that stuff out.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting, because I've also heard that you have to cut out meat 4 days prior from multiple sources that I have spoken to. But all of these sources were also British sources. So I wonder maybe if there's something there. So you had to obviously fast and do all of these things. And then you said you had a shout cleansing thing beforehand. Is that what you said?
Like a shower. So you're required to actually clean your body. Right. Yeah. So when you go into it, you feel prepared. You feel like you've actually geared up for something, and that you're ready to receive whatever comes at you. So before even doing the medicine, there's this very powerful feeling that you're about to do something life-changing. You're about to do something which is going to basically alter the way you look at things for the rest of your life. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but that really is how it goes.
No, I get you, man. I obviously, as I mentioned, I haven't done ayahuasca, but I have done DMT, and you just put that into words perfectly, because there is this sense, like something about just being in the presence of those molecules, that like your heartbeat actually automatically starts to go up. And it's maybe a part of this is because you're anticipating that, okay, yeah, maybe I'm about to commit to something that, like you said, could be life altering. And even just the fact that even on a very minimal scale, that, yeah, you're committing to a psychedelic experience, and you might have visuals and so on. I think there's something about it that I think it unlocks something deeper, that just from the smell of it alone, or even just being in the presence of the room with it, you feel a sense of elevation, which is both terrifying and very exciting at the same time. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the moment the actual brew came into the room we were sitting in, because it's a lot of people in one room, and that's how I've always done it. I think the first time it was slightly smaller, and then it just got bigger and bigger every time I went back. But when this substance entered the room, there was a sort of, it took me aback a bit. I felt like I was in the presence of something holy, in a way, and very sinister at the same time. You know, it terrified me, actually. There was this real nervous anticipation about what the fuck I was doing. But, you know, once it's down, it's probably one of the most foul-tasting things I've ever, swallowed. Very bitter. Sure. It's like the most off bitter coffee you've ever had. It just lingers in your mouth and dries your mouth out.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. Man. Yeah. I think I can imagine that. Yeah. And I would imagine that there's also this nerve-wracking thing of like, holy shit, I've just committed to this long ass experience, and I'm here, I've come all the way here, and I can't chicken out of this now, and there's this terrible taste in your mouth. I bet there's like a lot of those things in your mind that you have to somehow overcome, right?
Yeah, exactly. And having other people there in the room that you've never met before, who are there for the same reason, or, I guess they're personal reasons, but we're all there for, I guess, self-inquiry. I don't know about self-improvement, but definitely self-inquiry. So it's a reassuring feeling that you're not the only one who's, perhaps scared shitless.
Self-inquiry, not self-improvement. That's a very interesting way to put that into perspective, man. Okay, that's interesting to hear. And I think just talking about the I suppose the sense of dread and the oh shit feeling of it. I guess that there's also power to being able to overcome that, you know, because I mean, there's the saying of how for a young bird to fly, you know, it just simply has to jump the tree, otherwise it'll never succeed, you know. And it's the dare to fail. And I guess there is a powerful mental but also spiritual sense of empowering within just committing to that alone, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's definitely get a sense of the dual nature of the self, especially when the ego is challenged, when you're about to do something which is going to be life-changing, which is perhaps going to shatter your illusions about things. So with ayahuasca especially, there was like two sides of me kind of struggling with each other. One side was like, you're scared, you're scared, you're scared. The other was like, fuck you, I'm not scared, I'm going to do this. But, you know, once it's down, these two voices don't get any calmer. And sometimes they really, you know, reach, I guess, a climax. Because ayahuasca, what it does is it really elevates this sense of dualism, this kind of battle between, I guess, the shadow side and the conscious aspects of the mind. So you've got stuff coming up from the unconscious realms that you perhaps didn't look at for your whole life, or you pushed into the shadows when you had a bad experience with something. And all this stuff will come up. It certainly did for me. And you have to face it. You have to deal with it. But you're very conscious of the ego interjecting and trying to wrestle with it and trying to, I don't know, come to terms with it. So it's
very fascinating. And I think that goes in line with what you said just about the feeling of how when the substance entered the room, you felt that there was something very powerful and beautiful, but also something sinister as well. So I do get that sense of duality, even just from the very basic intuition, I guess, that you got from just the presence of the substance. So what was it like? Basically, like, let's say you've ingested the medicine and did you throw up, by the way?
Many times.
Okay.
But that was really after the first full weekend ceremony. I threw up a bit that time, but every time I went after, it got harder and harder, and I got sicker and sicker. So I think the first two times I went, I was actually trying not to be sick. I was really, because I had some weird aversion to vomiting. I don't know why. I'm pretty used to it now, but yeah, I was really trying to fight that urge to vomit, which I wouldn't recommend. You know, the reason you vomit is because your body really needs to. It needs to come out. The strange thing about the sickness and the vomit and the purging with ayahuasca is, although it's a physical process, it feels like you're really getting a lot of psychic material out. And there's a cleanse of something much deeper and much more profound than just, I don't know, poison in your guts. Yeah, there's a lightness that comes afterwards, a clarity that comes afterwards, especially if you've been puking for the whole night. And you've been puking non-stop and going to the toilet and blah, blah, blah. The feeling at the end of it, although it's highly unpleasant at the time, it's very rewarding, and it stays with you for a long time, but not just that night. You know, it'll carry with you during integration when you have to go back to normal life and, you know, back to reality, so to speak. There is a massive change, sort of rebalancing of one's energy centers, I would say.
It's like a purging, isn't it? Essentially.
Yeah, and it's purging can come in all sorts of forms. It might be vomiting, it might be shitting everywhere, sweating loads, crying a lot, that kind of stuff.
Have you done that? Have you shit everywhere?
Not everywhere. I managed to get to the toilet, but yeah. Jesus.
All right, that's good, man. That's good. That's just like a normal day on tour, isn't it?
Yeah, for some people. I was always fairly well behaved in that department.
Oh, that's good, man. Yeah, that's always good to hear. It's rare, I guess, but no, that's very cool. So, what do you see then? You said like just as a breakdown of the just even the visuals alone, which I know is probably a small factor of I guess the thoughts and the feelings you might actually be going through, but it does very much intertwine with all of that. So, what do you see?
Well, it's an interesting question. A lot of people have similar visions with this, and a lot of those visions can be time travel back in time, perhaps to when you were younger. A lot of people have this, very, very profound recollection of childhood. Sometimes going even beyond that to being in the womb or a previous life, this kind of thing. So there was quite a lot of that. There are a lot of very sort of intricate moments that I'd forgotten completely, which may or may not have been accurate when I was having this weird flashback experience, but it felt familiar. It didn't really feel like some illusion that came out of nowhere. It did feel significant. It did feel familiar. So there was quite a bit of that, a lot of childhood stuff, a lot of stuff to do with parents, ancestors. I mean, ayahuasca, it's sometimes called the vine of souls or the vine of the dead. The reason being is it can literally put you in communication with the deceased. So there was a lot of that. I remember having direct contact with my grandparents, which was incredible.
Wow.
They're long since passed, but I knew it was them, and they didn't come to me necessarily in physical form. They weren't as I remembered them, with grey hair and all the rest of it. It was their spirits, their actual, their essence. So although at the time it was kind of, well, what's this coming to, what's this trying to communicate with me? I knew straight away, after getting through that initial, I guess, hesitation, that it was them. So there was quite a bit of that, quite a bit of contact with the deceased. In terms of the dialogue and the exchange, the sense I got was more that we're watching over you, we're with you, we're protecting you, which was, reassuring and actually quite pleasant, because I, been missing them a lot, and feeling, I guess, feeling their, how can I put it? I could feel a lot of their energy in what I was doing at the time. I could feel a lot of their, how they physically were being carried through in my DNA. So it was nice to be visited, and it was nice to be reminded that they are there and that they are watching over. It was an interesting experience, and not in a corny way, not like we're in heaven watching over you or anything like that, but that we're living through your DNA.
That's beautiful, man.
Our voice is echoing through your DNA.
Echoing through your DNA. Yes, I really like that. And I mean, thank you so much for being open about that as well, But the thing is, I get you. I feel that I have very much those same kind of feelings, because if you think about it, let's try and really strip things down and actually try to have some kind of an understanding of what a human even is, if we can, of course, but we'll try. You think of how our DNA is passed on. Is essentially, if you look at a semen and the way that it's shaped, that's essentially a minuscule nervous system, right? And that is, it's like semen is like data. So with every procreation that happens, it's like data is getting copied and pasted, and there are certain patterns and like this, like nano things, all of the memories of our ancestors and everything exists within that data which we are passing along, and if you think about it, whilst those who've come before us might be gone, you yourself, where you sit at the moment, yes, you might have experienced ego death or have a feeling of on a psychic level what death might feel like. Well, you are yet to truly experience death, because through procreation and evolution, you have survived millions and millions of years until this point. And somehow, somewhere, I believe that all of that information is still attached within your existence. And by you, I mean, it's the same as me. It's the same as every person listening to this right now. And it's the same as every human being that is currently living and breathing on this planet right now as we speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I think that, and I think that, like you said, I mean, I've had weird thoughts like this before. I've never talked about this, but I had moments in my life, maybe about 6 years ago, I'm going to say, where I thought, like, okay, like I didn't think it was going to carry on for much longer. Let's just say that. And my immediate sort of reaction to it was okay, I need to have children now. That was kind of my thought process about it. And then that kind of just being under that pressure alone made me think, okay, so this is what we must have thought throughout the entirety of existence, where you have to have children in order to survive and carry on. Okay, because it's like every time you die, that's, let's say you've got children, but you die, that's only one branch of one big tree that's dying off. The rest of the tree still keeps on growing, and I've got a plan here, and I've been experimenting with that, and I see that thing over and over again, so it's like one death does not equal the end of the full bloodline, unless it's the very last one, of course, which is, I guess that's a sad thing if that happens, or if certain species of animals go extinct. But just to bring the point back to where I was going with it, it's that information is buried deep within all of us. And, because even if you think about your spine and your brain, that's essentially a semen. Aleister Crowley said it, that the mind is a disease of the semen. And I think that with the help of things like psychedelics, spiritual work, meditation, Kundalini, yoga, all of these things, I feel that there are ways in which we can hold a key and go back to this ancient semen that is our brain and unlock these boxes of information that are deeply etched within us. And I think that whatever the ultimate truth of the world it is that we're all seeking for, particularly like be it in divine formats or in science, I feel like it's already in here. It's just a matter of opening it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's common knowledge that we don't use nearly enough of our brains to begin with. So doing mind expanding practices, whether it's psychedelics, meditation, yoga, could be deep breathing exercises, even can be very effective. It can be very interesting and very revealing. And I mean, the way I see it, life is a bit of a experiment anyway. So it is good to experiment with these things, at least for me, and see what works. Because I think it is possible to access the parts of your brain that lay obscure for the majority of people, who are sort of stuck in a dumbed down state where they're kind of running like computer programs, just repeating the same thing over and over again instead of experimenting. This is the problem with leaving everything up to experts and letting experts do everything for you rather than trying things out for yourself.
I think David Icke said this very well. I mean, he's an interesting character anyway, but I think I heard him say something along the lines of, you do not understand the world through a scientific mind, and you do not understand the world through an academic mind. You understand the world through an open mind. And I think that's great, because that resonates with me. I think absolutely all the respect in the world to people who've dedicated their lives to certain different subjects and have become scholars of their own, be it through science, religion, culture. Like, to me, obviously, there's a different discussion attached to organized religion and the Abrahamic sects. However, I think that there's still a lot of truth that can be found within all of these. And in my world, there is no science versus spirituality and left versus right, or any of that. I mean, that's again a separate thing. But in my world, it's all just one pathway of us understanding the world that we live in and where we've come from. And I think that, and I also think that, to your point, we shouldn't allow ourselves to get distracted of what the ultimate truth is by just getting lost in, okay, yeah, this is the only thing that's going to define my life. It's just kind of like yourself. It's like you letting yourself only ever be described as the guitarist from Grave, Miasma, and Destroyer 666, which, by the way, is still a pretty cool title. Those are great bands. But you understand what I'm trying to say with that, right?
Sure. I think, most people are a lot more, they're more capable in many areas than they think they are. It's always good to take a risk and go into the unknown and try something new. And just with the point on people who've studied and gained expertise in certain fields, I've got the highest amount of respect for that. Not denigrating experts necessarily, but my problem is the mentality of following so-called experts on every given point, rather than having critical thinking and interjecting with critical thinking. You might be wrong or you might be right about something, but I think it's important for the individual to find out, rather than just being led here, there, and everywhere. I think it's important to critically think and, interject with advice, with maybe a bit of further research or looking around a topic, rather than just hearing the word expert and jumping to a conclusion that they must be right.
Very true, man. Very true. And I think that it's important. I mean, sometimes you just have to go through experiences for yourself personally. And particularly, I find, it doesn't always have to be this way, but challenging circumstances in life tend to really bring a lot of deeper understandings of things to us, for better or worse. I mean, you might go through a challenging experience and find out that, yeah, the experts were right after all anyway. But, I think sometimes, a lot of times, it's good if you can come to the conclusions for yourself and then weigh it against the world, because at least as far as the personal experience is concerned, particularly reflecting on the last 2 years, you might find out the experts weren't so right after all.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Yeah, you see what I mean. The last few years have been a great example of this. It's so confusing the last 2 years. I don't want to go off on a tangent here about it, but
by all means, feel free to do that.
There are enough fucking tangents out there online that last you, the full 2.5 years. But yeah, I think we were bombarded, the general public were bombarded with so much information, more information than we could process coherently and objectively. Well, some of us could maybe process it objectively, but I think many people struggle with it. You had this mixture of experts, politicians, scientists, pseudoscientists, TV personalities, bloggers, social media personalities, or I don't really like to call them personalities because I don't know, they just seem like copies of each other.
They ain't got no personality.
But yeah, you have all these angles coming at you, all these different fucking voices coming at you, telling you sort of the same thing, but also contradicting what they're telling you at the same time. So one week you might be told that something's safe and effective, and then the next week you're told it's a bit less safe and effective than it was the week before. And on it goes. And now here we are, and it's kind of speaking for itself, right?
It is, and it's really sad, you know. I mean, I've said this on the podcast multiple times. I think people probably know my views on it thus far, but I think that it was unfortunate purely because a lot of people who are genuinely good-hearted, I think it really brought out the worst of them, because you got people fighting for the greater good, which, after all, it kind of turns out to be just a fucking, business for pharmaceuticals and corporations who now at this point have the blood of millions of people on their hands, if you ask me. And I think, and that's not to say that, just for the sake of clarity here as well, a lot of things that did come out were true. Certain things maybe were effective, but the general approach that we had was only maybe, 20% accurate for what it actually should have been. And by that, I mean, let's say, for example, it was I think it was a very deadly virus to begin with, because I personally had it back in March 2020. Me and my band Trivex, we were actually on tour in England, and then we were supposed to do a string of like weekend shows just the week after, and the lockdown happened in between those two weekends. So, and the thing was that I got sick whilst we were on tour, and when we came back, first of all, I found out that there's no fucking food left in the shops, so people immediately showed their true colors on that, which was like, okay, good, thanks for the test. And then for me, I had the virus, and it actually really fucked me up, because I had it for, I think, for maybe about 8 weeks, right? And it got so bad that I even tried to call ambulance and get people to fucking come and take me away. And I've never had an illness like that in my life. And what was weird about it was, at the time, I kept telling people, because, hey, I've got this thing. I'm pretty sure I do. It ticks off all the boxes. And everyone was like, oh, no, maybe you haven't. It was a very, very strange and bizarre thing. But then I've had it again since. I think I had the Delta version. It's like Apple phones, they just kept doing updates for it. And I had that one, and then I barely felt it. And then I had the one after, I barely felt that one either. And then, so it was kind of like I built natural immunity from the first one, which was pretty shit. But then after that, I've never had a problem. And obviously I haven't had the jab, and the thing is, the point that I'm trying to make by bringing this up is to say that, yeah, there was a real problem to begin with, of course. I don't do the wholesale version of ideologies of like, oh, everything is a lie, everything is bullshit, although a lot of things are bullshit. But I also don't get the thing of like, okay, like, just let's take a step back and actually look at what the fuck's going on here. And I can very easily see now, for sure, that it was a bad situation to begin with, but it was absolutely fucking manipulated and blown out of proportion for what it really was. Where we went with it was completely, I think, the wrong way. And, I know it's conspiracy theory or whatever the fuck that even means anymore, but it kind of feels like it was pretty planned, looking at it now.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about the fact that it seems to bring out the worst in people, especially people who are on side with the establishment narrative. who called anyone that didn't want to get needle crafted, to quote Thomas Sheridan, treating them like pariahs, or treating them like outcasts, pieces of shit that should be, you know, sent off to a camp or whatever. There are all sorts of, you know, you can go through lists and lists of fucking vitriol posted on social media. Yep. It was brought to public attention via, you know, TV shows. I don't watch any of this shit. It's mainly, you know, podcasts I follow that talk about this stuff and give examples. But yeah, so much vitriol out there from good people, people who are doing the right thing. And it just made me realize that, you know, your so-called normal, respectable people can turn into, you know, very bloodthirsty, fucking savage, nasty, mean-spirited cunts. Just like that, through programming, through effective propaganda, through effective programming, and just wanting to be on the right side. But if you look at the bigger picture now, they're definitely on the wrong side of history. Obviously, I don't have a problem with anyone who did whatever they did for their own personal reasons and didn't try and impose their will on anyone else. Yeah. I mean, personally, I've got friends who are unjabbed and jabbed. I haven't fallen out with anyone. Haven't really talked about it in great detail or argued much about it, because I'd rather maintain friendships. And luckily, you know, the friends I have aren't complete cunts and kind of disown me. So, you know, that's something.
That's fantastic. And I'm exactly the same, man. You know, I've got nothing against anyone who had it. I have very close people to me who have had it, and I have the exact opposite as well, who, like myself, they've avoided it, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But I think it's just a fucking cognitive dissonance of people who say, my body, my choice, say that you have to get jabbed, otherwise you know, then you should get fired, you know. So you have to partake in a medical experiment, which basically is profiting corporate pharmaceuticals, who we know are fucking responsible for so much bullshit that the humanity as a whole has had to experience. And also people, you know, like the supposed fucking anti-fascist people taking the mentality of, hey, fuck these people, let's exclude them from society. You didn't do this, you don't belong with us. You don't deserve healthcare treatment. You don't deserve this. Like, I had people like fucking telling me this, and it was only really when I broke down some things for them and told them about some of my, without going into too much details, personal insider information, that they then started scratching their heads like, oh, okay, maybe there's something else here. But it's like, an apology is not going to fix this, because we're all together at the end of the day. I'm not against those people, and I hope that at least most of them have fucking realized, even though I still see these stupid ass fucking I got my booster stickers everyone. I just think, you know, like, I don't like judging people, but fuck off, seriously. Still at this point, that's what you're following, you know. It's just a thing of, hey, I'm with the right team, you know. It's like
yeah, I think it's all unraveling now, and there's so much backpedaling going on now. You know, especially in the mainstream media, in politics, even in the medical field. There's so much backpedaling going on now. Oh, we might have got it wrong. Oh,
it's falling into pieces, man. You know, but it's like, yeah. But at the same time, it's like they already made their profit. So this is why I'm saying that an apology is not going to fix anything. It's not to say that they need to do more, but it's just the thing of like, just at least understand what the fuck happened, you know?
Yeah, I guess. But it's actually quite, I wouldn't say satisfying watching this great unraveling of the whole bullshit narrative, but I knew it was coming, man. And the whole thing with being locked out of society, I knew they were calling our bluff. I knew it from day one. And they said, oh, if you haven't been jabbed, then you're not going to be able to do this, that, and the other. Like, yeah, right. Fuck you, man. I pretty much did what I wanted during lockdown. Didn't affect me really. I might have had a month off work, a few weeks off work here and there, but generally it wasn't so bad, especially in England. I know a lot of other countries had it much, much worse than we did. But yeah, I think a lot of it was really about a choice to be compliant and a choice to be manipulated by legalese. The mandates. What's a mandate? Yeah, you have to enter a contract to actually be a mandatee. If you don't contract with a mandate, then it doesn't apply. So it's all bullshit.
Absolutely, man. And it should have been.
I just had a gut feeling. I had a gut feeling from day one that something wasn't right, and I trusted my gut. I didn't, say too much about it at the time. I wanted to hold off because I wasn't desperate to go traveling. A lot of people, did what they did because they wanted to. I understand it. They wanted to get back to their lives. They wanted to get on planes, go to gigs, all that kind of stuff. I get it, but yeah, I didn't think it was worth it personally.
Yeah, man. It should have been about choice. And the thing that I wanted to say as well was this was the single most bitter I told you so that I have ever had to go through in my entire life, probably thus far.
Yeah, I guess it's just one of those. But to be honest, these days I'm trying to not pay too much attention to it because everything that's happening now, I was expecting it, and to, I guess, focus too much attention on it, it's kind of a waste of my energy. Or rather, be directing my energy elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm fully with you, but I think it's also healthy to talk about it now because even though we knew, we didn't know like we know now, if that makes sense. And I think it's just a testament of the value of having at least some degree of stoicism in especially in the modern world, not reacting to things emotionally, because this is how it works. It's like I come and grab you and I start shaking you going, and I give you a sense of panic and fear, but then I myself come and tell you, hey, if you want to calm down and stop feeling anxious, take this drug that I made, and then I make money off of you. And this is how the system works. That shake, that's essentially the media, that it creates the fear in the population. Everyone gets emotional, their brains fucking swell up. And a lot of people haven't been through a lot of really serious challenges in their life, And again, this is not to take away from things that people experience in their life, but it is to do with anxiety, depression, or just even, like breakups, shitty events at work, just like these really, these things that can be mundane for some and then quite deep for others. It's still shitty things that happen to people, but generally speaking, our sort of bar for how much stress and real challenge can withhold is pretty fucking low in society, I would say. And that's not to say that, hey, I am this fucking immovable object that can withstand anything. No, it's not that. But at least being able to recognize when something is bullshit is extremely helpful, I think.
Definitely. What you say about, comfort and hardship, I think things are going to get very, very uncomfortable and very hard for a lot of us, probably within our lifetimes. I don't think we've seen anything yet, but the way things are going, we have to expect it and we have to prepare for it psychologically and physically. I think it's very important. That's why I think, even something as simple as training as much as you can physically, looking after your body, is very important. It's one thing. If things get really bad, no one can stop you training. And training is something that makes you feel good. It makes you feel positive. It makes you feel, what's the word? It's basically the opposite of stagnation. It gives you that I can do it feeling. So I think getting into physical training right now is a really important thing for people who aren't already doing it, because it's something no one can take away from you. You don't even need weights to do any physical training. You just have a floor, do push-ups, run around the block, whatever it is. But yeah, preparing for hardship, it's important, man, because, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the next few years. I think things are going to get pretty fucking weird, that's for sure.
I hate to say it, man, but I absolutely agree with you. And to the point of just personal strength alone, I think that is extremely crucial. And like you said, if there are people who haven't started yet, I think for your own sake, you need to do it purely just because of, you know, because there's this thing as well with physical workout. You always think that it's only a physical thing, but it's not. What it does for your mind is, I would say, most of the work. Yes, I might be able to go in and then train different body parts, and then after a while, once you build those muscles, you can look in the mirror and then you can actually see like your deltoids and then your lats and things. You can assess that, but that, to me at least, is literally like 5% of what it actually means to be at the gym and what it does for my mind and spirit. And to the point of what we've just been talking about, one thing that immediately made me very dubious about this was the fact that gyms were shut down during the lockdowns. And it's like, okay, so it's not people's health you care about. Okay, and I don't give a fuck you're gonna say. And that there are ways that could have gone wrong, I guess, if we were going with that original narrative of let's keep distance and whatnot, which didn't really make that much of a difference in the end anyway. But I think that made it very clear to me, you know, like in America, they're giving away like fucking free burgers for people just to get vaccinated. It's like, is this some kind of a skit on a comedy show or something?
Free burgers, free beer, free pizza. Yeah. Fucking hell. It was actually quite funny. Free donuts. That was the best one.
Free donuts. That's right. Yeah. Let's fucking spike your insulin resistance through the fucking roof whilst we're trying to protect your health.
Man, the audacity of it was actually quite comical. There were a lot of funny things about this whole fucking pandemic, you know. It did make me laugh on many occasions, and it still is. Sometimes you just have to laugh, man.
Yeah. I had a similar reaction at a lot of times, although the laughter is always sort of muddied by a sense of great frustration as well, you know. And I think this is the thing that we got to really take into consideration as well. I think a lot of modern society, I know there's the whole argument of the masculine and feminine being out of balance, which I do believe is true, because there's the gender aspect of things that you can talk about. That's almost an entirely different discussion, but there's an energetic aspect of masculine and feminine, you know, just like there's you know, just like even, you know, there's always a positive and a negative. Just like even when you plug into a socket, even that is a masculine and a feminine. And you know, how you've got the magnetic positive and negative things, you know, with like magnets, you know, and like you got the North Pole and South Pole and all these things. This sort of polar energies, this exists within our reality, and you need that between people in order to make things work, and there needs to be a balance of the two as well. You know, that's how you make a relationship work between two people. You know, you could never have, you know, just like when you've got two ends of a magnet that are they're the same type. If you try and bring them close together, they start resisting. You can't make them touch each other. And I think it's like that. You know, you need the two sides of the magnet to be able to bring things together. And energetically speaking, where I'm going with this is that in society, the masculine and feminine are very much, I feel, out of balance with one another. And part of this is a result of comfort. The other part of it, I might even say, that is done on purpose. So when you've got a lot of males around society that are very much, I would say, I don't know what's the right word, but they're sort of engrossed in femininity and feminine sort of attributes, if you will, which that in itself is not a bad thing. But when you're completely engrossed by it and no one is seeking being physically better, you know, it's like everyone's got dad bods, and there's this narrative of like, oh, we prefer men with beer bellies, you know, who express their feelings and emotions. And this is not even against the feelings aspect of things, but more rather that you express your feelings too much that basically everyone you've expressed feelings to now has some kind of control over you. And there's this thing where there's no longer any strength in masculine sort of sense of empowerment that is carried by a lot of males in society. And I think from a bigger picture, if you're a government or say a ruling force, that is perfect. That's the perfect narrative, because if the males aren't going to stand up for anyone else because they're too busy fucking sitting at home, fucking drinking beer and eating pizza and fucking subscribing to OnlyFans and fucking jerking off every day and not working out, they're not going to be able to revolt against you. They're fucking pussies, you know, they're weak. They got no power. They got no strength to them. And I can see this in a lot of places, you know, like just to, I know I'm going on for this for way too long, but just look at Iran as an example. Obviously, the entire country is in fucking upheaval now and people have had enough. But for the longest time, one of the methods of oppression that the government actually used on our people was through these different means, you know, and how it would actually import drugs into the society to get the younger men hooked on fucking heroin and some even on crocodile. I don't know if you're familiar with that drug.
Oh, yeah, crocodile.
Yeah. We had a crocodile problem in Tehran, man. You know, I don't know.
I thought I thought that was just in Russia.
Now we well, you know, the ties between Russia and Iran aren't you know, that's, you know, that's there, you know, and
I thought Iran had better taste in drugs.
Well, we do have good access to opium just through our neighbors in Afghanistan, but that's besides the point. But what I was saying, I know, man, it's funny though. But what I'm saying is that's if, as a ruling government, you want to stop your people to revolt against you and your bullshit propaganda in any way, it is the men that you target first, because they're the muscle, for a lack of a better term.
They're the protectors. They're the ones who will actually defend their women. Well, in theory.
Absolutely, yeah. It's always the men protecting the women and children. That's not to say that women can't protect themselves, but just even down to the genetics alone, it's a pretty big difference, man. And I don't think we're headed in the right direction when it comes to that. And when, I mean, U.S. troops, I think, just arrived in Ukraine. Was it yesterday or a couple of days ago? Right? Did you hear about this?
No. To be honest, I've kind of switched off a bit lately. I've had to for my own sanity.
I know. Like, I almost wish I didn't know that, man. But I'm pretty sure that's just fucking happened. And
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
No, No, I mean, there's already been a by proxy back and forth for a while, and it's kind of like I'm not even taking sides here. I just think that we're fucked now. I think yeah, and that's not to instill panic or there's no fear mongering. I don't get fucking views for free. I don't. This is not what this podcast is for. The whole point of it is to just have open conversations here, you know, and I'm just sharing my thoughts. I'm pretty fucking concerned about that, as I'm sure anyone would be, to be honest.
Yeah, the way it's escalating or could escalate, it's going to be a massive paradigm shift for sure. But yeah, man, I mean, as I say, there's only so much of this I can take in at any given time, and it just it breaks my brain after a while. Just the amount of fucked up shit going on. I know it's important to know about. I know it's important to be aware. But yeah, I just lately, man, I've had to take a bit of a step back.
No, I hear you, bro. I
think for many people like us who are seeing through a lot of this shit, there are a lot of people who are just sucked in and just devouring as much information as possible. I don't know how healthy that is, man. I think you can just get information overload, and before you know it, you don't really know what the fuck's going on because you've just, ingested so much that you can't possibly process it properly.
I think this is actually a very important point also, because you're not supposed to even know that much stuff. You're not supposed to take in that much information per day. At least it doesn't feel healthy to do it. I mean, I was doing this earlier where I was like watching lots of different stuff, and then I was like, hang on a minute, like how much shit am I ingesting and not even allowing myself to think through it, So I had to just have like an hour of silence where I didn't listen to anything. I didn't look at my phone, which was pretty good practice, And then afterwards I was like, okay, I felt more chilled out. Like, you're not just listening. You can generate thoughts of your own, which I think is powerful. I recommend it to people. Just go turn off your fucking TV and actually think.
It's one of the big dangers of current world we're living in at the moment, especially with the advent of social media and everything. You've really got to question whether your thoughts are your own a lot of the time, especially when people are jumping to conclusions about things. How many of these thoughts and conclusions are actually made by rational thought processes? Very few. A lot of people are jumping to conclusions based on being triggered by something, and it's all very emotional. And I think this is a big danger with, social media, whether it's fucking Facebook or even Telegram groups. Telegram groups can fucking rile you up, just by looking at a certain news update or news report. It can ruin my day. So I'm trying to just steer away from it as much as I can. But it's certainly a new...
Do you follow that Real News No Bullshit page on Telegram?
I've had a look at it a few times. I don't really follow it.
Right.
I might receive something from a friend that shared something from there or whatever.
I enjoy a lot of Keith's rantings on Telegram. I think they're the fucking best.
Which ones?
Keith's ranting. KK, Destroyer.
Right. Well, he speaks a lot of sense, actually.
It does. Yeah, I know. He does. Yeah. I think I agree with you, man. And I think this is, again, why it's important to focus internally. And like we said, just focus on your own strength, because inevitably that's something that leads to independence and freedom. And that's the thing that sooner or later is going to almost become forbidden for you to have. And I know that might sound dramatic to a lot of people, but you got to understand how power and control work. And that's the direction that we're headed to, so grab as much of that as you fucking can,
I think it's very important not to give your mind away and to allow your mind to be made up by something else or someone else.
Absolutely.
Real risk we have at the moment, just this sort of mass psychosis on all sides. It could be on the narrative side, and it could be on the so-called anti-vax side. I hate that fucking word, by the way, but
same. I mean. Yeah, and I feel the same about that term, because it's such a, It's the same as when someone says something that you don't agree with, so you just call them a Nazi because they can't defend themselves anymore.
Yeah, or because you don't actually have a real response.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't know what to say other than shout an insult. It's an emotional reaction, really, and a really pathetic one. I don't think anyone knows what a Nazi is anymore.
No. I've had that conversation already on the podcast with my friend Carl from Atlas, which was certainly interesting to get his viewpoint on it as well. And yeah, I think there's I don't know what that means anymore either, you know. And it's just I mean, I've read Wikipedia pages about people that have got that I know have got nothing to do with that, or at the very least they've never even talked about it, but then they'll try and find some way to link it to that just to take away that person's credibility. And it's like, aha, so you're trying to silence that person. You know, this isn't an encyclopedia, this is a fucking
Wikipedia is no different to a fucking fact-checking website.
That's right.
You know, anyone can add any old bullshit they want to it. Concoct all sorts of false narratives about someone or something. So Wikipedia is fucking not worth going to if you want real information. You better off going
not
to
really.
a older history text. You know, if you want to find out about communism or fascism, go back to the sources, man. You know, read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Engels, or read Mein Kampf if you want to find out about Nazism. You know, why do you want a fucking third, fourth, fifth, sixth hand version of what someone thinks Nazism is? Why not go to the source? Anyway, I think I digress, but you know what I mean? It's, these words have lost all their power. People are just using them as insults now, because they trigger an emotional response in anyone listening. So for the typical normie who hears someone being tarnished with whatever, these words, they'll instantly have an emotional reaction and want to ostracize said person.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the way it works. These certain words have trigger effects and they trigger emotional responses in people because the conditioning and the propaganda is being so relentless that if you don't have a critically thinking brain on active duty, then it's going to push that button.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's very well put right there. You know, it's the whole thing of you're either an anti-vax, anti-science, Trump supporter, flat earther, or you're, I don't know, a libtard or snowflake. You're this, sheeple, that. And it's like, the truth isn't entirely just on one side. Okay. I think it's in between all of those. It's in the empty spaces between them. And I think that what a better way from a strategic standpoint to divide people than to give them two teams to choose from. And then they've got no choice but to identify themselves by those teams rather than have an identity of their own. Everyone is almost like born into this, as I mentioned earlier, wholesale version of ideologies where just because you believe in this, now you got to believe in all these other things as well. So you're either a right-wing meat eater, this and that, Christian, or you're a left-wing vegan, they, them, and it's like fucking, you can be whatever you want to be. That's the point I'm trying to make. We can all have different points of views, and we can all have solid reasons for why we believe in the things that we believe in, because each person's individual experience in life is unique, and you never know what that other person might have experienced that they are now thinking that thing. That there might have been some kind of an emotional trigger, as you mentioned earlier, somewhere down the line in their life that's led them to believe something that goes maybe against what you believe in. That doesn't mean that we should fucking tear each other down and fucking call each other names and whatever. And I know it's hard. I don't know. It's very complicated. The whole human experience. Sometimes it's good to just be able to have civil discourse without fucking trying to fucking scream at people for being different to you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ideal situation, but I know, luckily, with the friends I keep, they tend to have balanced conversations that don't get out of hand. So I'm grateful for that.
I love that approach. Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned earlier, you said, if you want to read this and if you want to read Karl Marx, but then if you want to read Mein Kampf, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that education is key to understanding a lot of things. And I'll make an example. As you know, I was born and raised in Iran, which obviously, unfortunately, is called the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I've grown up detesting that fucking religion, right? I hate, if you've grown up in a free Western society, I can see how your comforts might give you the sense of disillusion to want to defend that religion, but it's a pretty shitty fucking religion in a lot of ways, and I'm happy to discuss that. But even with that in mind, I still have a copy of the Quran in my room. It's not a burnt copy, it's a legit copy. Like, I can actually read it. I'm not just fucking tore it to pieces just to be angry. I actually have that copy here, and I read it from some time to time, because even though I have a lot of criticism against it, I still think that some percentage of the truth or a better understanding of life might be there. It might not, but it doesn't hurt to try and find out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I agree with that mentality. I've always found it a bit distasteful, when metal bands start tearing out pages in the Bible and, throwing it all over the place and whatnot. You just think, have you actually read anything in the Bible before you've ripped all its pages out? So yeah, you can find a lot of, interesting storytelling to start with in holy books. And you can also find, certain truths in common. I use the word truths loosely, but things that these religions have in common, which you can learn from. You can certainly learn about the evolution of monotheism by bouncing these books off each other. You could look at, the Quran, you could look at passages from the Old Testament and the New Testament, and see a connection there and see how these things kind of developed. So I think it is important to educate yourself rather than just show revulsion and detest these things and rip them up. You got to know your enemy if you think these religions are your enemy. I totally understand, growing up around such a repressive regime and wanting to rebel against this. It's a very different thing, but sort of outright, like making an identity based on rebellion, I think is some very shaky foundations. How a lot of people model personas based on being against something. I don't think that's enough. What are you going to replace it with? What is it exactly within those holy books that you hate so much?
I think that's very wise. And just on a psychological level, I also feel that a lot of those problems are also sourced, not all of them, but a lot of them, I think, are sourced internally, so that there's an internal problem that you have to deal with. And until you deal with that problem, you're always going to find an enemy in something or some forms. Like a lot of people, for example, they bounce off of different relationships, and then every time that relationship is over, they're blaming their ex for being the abusive, toxic ex, and then the cycle goes on and on and on and on, and they never take a moment to actually look at themselves and say, hey, what am I doing that this is happening? Right? It's always every other person's fault. It's the same with the anti-religious thing. It's like, okay, you wage war on Christianity, okay, you move on, got to find something else to rebel against. There's these things which I think rather than even see that as a problem, you can also take something like that and treat it as an opportunity to just get better at life, because I've been like that to an extent, where it's like I have a I have to rebel against everything. I since childhood have had a fucking serious problem with any kind of authority, and not always in a hostile way, but just in a way of, hey, I don't. Why do you want me to do that? Explain to me exactly why you want me to do something. That's always been my mindset since I was
Yeah,
a
I
kid.
think it's definitely something which a lot of metalheads have in common. I think, um, this rebellious streak, so to speak. But it's certainly more pronounced, I think, in one's teenage years. It was for me,
Mm-hmm.
when I actually started, getting interested in theology and magic, even things like that. Sort of realized I have to actually read these books. I can't just take bits and pieces and um, just decide that I hate the whole thing. Um, it's better to educate yourself and have a more rounded worldview. Um, sure, I think when religions become organized and streamlined in a sense of one size fits all, it becomes very problematic. And because we are all individuals, and I don't think it's really within our nature necessarily to all be herded into one thought process or one totalitarian worldview. Sure, it happens, but I don't know if it actually functions effectively for a long enough period of time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. And I think that's very wise. That's a much better way of, I think, perceiving anything in life, is to at least have that kind of open mindset, which I guess being kind of a metal elitist isn't always the most natural thing that might come to some of us. But, it's I think that's a very good way to look at things. Tell me a little bit, because you touched on reading books and on magic and religion and things like that as a teenager. You currently actually, besides being the bass player in Adorior and just working on some music projects, you also operate as a tarot reader. And
Yeah, yeah,
I'm very fascinated to hear about this, because I've had my own personal experiences with that, and just as a disclaimer, I'm a super, like, I doubt everything, and I'm doubtful, but I'm also open-minded. So I'll approach something even if I'm doubtful of it. That's my mindset throughout a lot of life, when it comes to certain things and different knowledges and experiences, if that makes sense. And my experiences with it have been pretty goddamn fucking accurate. And I find that really interesting. So that's just my experience alone. So I'm wanting to hear your side of it. First of all, what made you want to get into it? And what's the sort of general overview of the whole thing with being a tarot reader?
I think with tarot, the one thing that really drew me towards it initially was the fact that it contained within the system Kabbalah, Hermeticism, alchemy, also some Jungian thoughts on archetypes. It brings all these things in together, creating a system that really works in terms of learning about yourself, learning about life's journey and the psychological processes that one might be in at any given time. I started actually using tarot cards when I was doing ayahuasca. I remember, on my first ceremony, I brought a pack with me that my wife gave me, because she had been doing casual readings for me beforehand. And I really liked it. It was an interesting form of divination. So I found it very useful to set, I guess, points of focus during a ceremony. I've done about 5 ceremonies now, so obviously I've used quite a few cards over the years and got to know the cards quite well. It's interesting to note that the tarot, it's made up of, in fact, 3 decks. Some people might argue with this, but it's 78 cards in total. You've got 22 major arcana cards. The major arcana, you could argue, are sort of Jung's archetypes. What he argues are cultural imprints, images and ideas built up by the thoughts of mankind over history. The interesting thing about the major arcana is it tells a story. Follow the sequence from 0 to 21. So you start on the Fool and you end with the World. It tells a really interesting story about the development from childhood to learning about the masculine and feminine principles, the principles of creation, becoming creative, coming into your own, about ambition and developing ambition and intuition, also about the shadow and becoming aware of this thing called the subconscious, this thing that can, drive conscious outcomes without you really knowing about it. That's where cards like, the Moon come into play, or the Tower, things like that. Also the Hermit, very powerful cards in regards to shadow consciousness. So this kind of storytelling by just the major arcanas, that's before you get into any of the other cards. It's very profound, and it's something I think the majority of us can relate to. Also, in regards to the actual deck I've been using, it's one of the most famous decks. It's the Waite-Smith deck. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. The Waite-Smith deck, I think it was, just need to consult my notes here. I think it was commissioned in 1910 by Edward Waite, and it's based on the Order of the Golden Dawns deck, with a few changes here and there. Obviously, the Golden Dawn deck is personal to initiates of the Golden Dawn. Okay, so it's slightly altered, but a very useful deck and really great to actually be put out there and to be used by members of the general public who can actually learn about, the mysteries and the mystery schools, particularly, Kabbalistic thought, and alchemy and things like this. So that's just the major arcana. The major arcana were very useful over the years, just cementing points of focus during ceremonies. It does sound cheesy, but it does tell the story of life's journey. And when one does ayahuasca ceremonies, it's very much about reflection and developing oneself to take on life's journey. So that was one of the main reasons, I guess, I wanted to pursue tarot, because it really resonated with that idea of the Fool's journey to, I guess, self-realization to some extent. I won't use the term enlightenment because I don't like it. I think people can rise and fall in and out of enlightenment just like that. I've seen it happen. Enlightenment, I think it's reserved for people who've given up everything to some extent to pursue one thing in a very one-pointed way. But to, exist in this part of the world with all the distractions, certainly in my life, I wouldn't call myself an enlightened person. But certainly I've had experiences, and I've had very challenging experiences to my psychology, and physically. Certainly gone through quite a lot, but yeah, enlightenment, it's reserved for, I'd say, holy men.
Absolutely fascinating, man. And first of all, very well said. I very much like and appreciate your humble approach to the whole aspect of enlightenment, but also I suppose that provokes the thought that that's the way which it should be, right? Like even if you are, you made a very good point that you can fall in and out of it, and I'd never quite thought of it like that. But when I reflect on my own life and some of the things that I've seen throughout my time, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And as for the tarot, man, that's I mean, it's such a vast sort of I guess it's really hard to explain how it actually works, and I'm wondering if you can help me with this a little bit. But for me personally, the way that I see it is that there are always these things that happen within the world and the universe, especially when you find yourself being aligned and not distracted, and being somewhat clean on I guess a spiritual but also physical, mental level, all these things. When you find yourself aligned, as they say, and somewhat grounded, you start to notice a lot of interesting paths and messaging within the universe. Like sometimes it just talks directly at you, and you see these things, and then you go, okay, I see you. I see what you're doing. Like there's a lot of times in life where there are a lot of very interesting what we call coincidences, which is not really something that I believe in. Like certain things where you meet someone on a date where later on it makes perfect sense why you met that person, or even something as simple as you're thinking something and then you can get messages from the universe through numerology or different times, and that you're thinking something, you're thinking of an idea, and then you look around, and then the first number that you see is 111, or or 777. These
Or
kind of
9/11 in
events.
my case. I always see 9/11.
Yeah.
Every time I look at the fucking clock, it's 9/11.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, right? It's like the universe is like talking directly to us, and I think it's so cynical to me to ignore that. Obviously, like it doesn't concern me even if I'm the only person on the planet who thinks that. Like that's fine, because I see it for what it is, and for me that works. But one of the beautiful things about that is, I mean, there's so many different facets to it. I mean, you just said 9/11. I went through a period in my life where I was seeing 9/11 all of the time, and there's only twice in a day where you would see it, but coincidentally, I was seeing it all the fucking time, like once in the morning, once in the evening. And it's not like I would check for my phone to see it, it's just that there would always be something that would happen. You receive a text message, you're trying to play some music, and without going into too much details of what it was that I was experiencing at that particular time, basically, I did something which I had to do. And once I did that thing, the number stopped appearing, right? And this was very strange, but very interesting and very important, right? And then months and months later, I got curious and I actually looked it up. And I said, what's the meaning of 9/11? And basically, the conclusion which I gathered from looking at all the different sources was that it's, I mean, supposedly angelic number, which is a reminder that you need to do something that which you haven't done, or you need to make a change, or you need to create an event or do something, that it is something that is, and is reminding you about that thing. And that's apparently what those numbers meant, which is fascinating, because at the time when I was seeing them, I didn't know that. But it was interesting that once I did the thing that I needed to do, which I later found out was definitely the thing I needed to do, the numbers stopped appearing. So very interesting one with that, and how the universe communicates with us.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're seeing, I would maybe look into
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I mean, in tarot, number 9 is the hermit, and the hermit is all I guess, self-inquiry, retreating away from the world of things, so to speak, and having an internal dialogue with oneself. And 11 is the number of justice in the tarot as well. So weighing things up. It can also be a number of new beginnings, tying up loose ends, and judging things based on how they actually are, not on how you want them to be or how you wish them to be, not how you emotionally will something to be. It's how things actually are. And with tarot as a whole, especially with the major arcana, the final card in the whole sequence, some people say it's the Fool, it's the ending and the beginning. I couldn't really disagree with that. But number 21 is the World card. And the World card is governed by the entity or the archetype Saturn, or the planet Saturn, which I find really interesting, because the nature of Saturn is cycles and harvests and accepting reality for what it is, not fighting with yourself, but actually accepting that life is full of burden. There is a weight to existence. We do carry a certain weight and burden in life, which is to move forward, to move through hardship, to maybe put up with bullshit for some time, to actually, have a breakthrough. Most people do have to put up with a certain degree of hardship in their lives in order to get somewhere. You don't get anything in life through sitting around doing nothing. So that's one thing I really love about the tarot reading. The fact that it ends on a card governed by Saturn, I find it's brutal, but it's also awesome. It's actually a very positive. There's a positive resonance with that. I mean, the deity Saturn's always seen as this terrible entity who has a very mean streak. But really, I think when one embraces the Saturnian nature of existence, it's actually it's a form of, I would say, self-love. When you actually accept that life is hard and you embrace it.
By embracing the suffering that is the Saturnalian nature of things, absolutely. Kronos, the god of time. Yeah, and to me, it's a more mundane example, but just going to the gym, for example, that's a Saturnian virtue, as far as I'm concerned, because you're embracing the struggle and you're embracing the time that is attached to it, that you have to struggle for that time, but then you have to wait and you have to cycle it to heal and grow, and then you have to come back, and then you have to repeat this cycle over and over. And the only way to overcome time, I guess, and the suffering is to embrace it, really, and embrace it for what it truly is. What's that, sorry?
You'll grow by embracing it.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to exercise, or if you're into lifting weights. I mean, the deity Saturn is always connected to iron, right? So pumping iron, you could be onto something there.
Fuck yeah. I think so. I always saw a very strict correlation between that, actually. And just to the subject of tarot as well, the main reason which I discussed the universe's way of messaging that it sort of deals us is purely because I see tarot reading as a way of you are creating a window for that messaging to come through, right? So you can always call it coincidence or accident. I don't believe in that. And I believe that, and again, you're the tarot reader, so correct me on this if that analogy might seem wrong, but to me, there's a karmic force behind every card being pulled, and you receiving that card at that moment was what you were meant to receive for the longest time, for every event that happened, you know, just for that, like that tiny neuron to decide this is where I'm going at that moment, to me a karmic build-up of the person getting the reading done for them. At that moment, that's what they needed to see, and that's what they needed to receive through the universe at that precise moment.
I think with the right line of questioning, it's always a bit tricky if someone is coming to you without a question. I mean, I don't mind doing it. The majority of my readings have been people who are dabbling, who've never actually had a reading before, and they come for their first one. When you don't have a question, yeah, I mean, people can get a lot out of it. But when you're doing these short readings that last 15 minutes, you tend not to get such a fleshed out answer. I mean, you might touch the surface of something, but I think when the line of questioning is very specific, then what you're saying definitely holds true. Absolutely.
Very interesting, man. What are some of the most interesting stuff that's happened for you during your reading that even you might have turned around and said, oh shit, you know, because like, just take us through that, you know, like if there's anything that's happened that, you know, obviously you can share, because obviously I understand that tarot reading can also be quite a personal thing too, but what are some things that you've gone through whilst doing a tarot reading where even you yourself found that to be quite profound?
Well, it's an interesting question. Usually when you're doing readings for friends, there's always an argument that you can bias the reading because you know that person well. Mm-hmm. But sometimes if I'm reading for a very close friend, I can do a 9 or 10 card spread, which is answering a question directly. And before I've even given a breakdown of that spread, once all the cards are turned over, it's like, fucking hell. Like, yes, I know this person, but this is telling me something very profound about that person, which I know to be true. And that's without me even interjecting with fleshing out the reading. So I find those moments of, holy shit, I kind of know what story this is trying to tell about this person straight away without having to say anything. That's the fascinating part. Interjecting with your own interpretation and your own understanding of the cards is definitely there's a lot of joy that comes with it. But for me, it's the initial seeing the spread as it unfolds and just knowing straight away what's going on with that person, what's going on in the person's life. The interesting thing about the tarot, I said earlier, personally, I think it's 3 packs of cards in one. You've got 78 cards in total. You've got the major arcana, which is 22 cards. And then you've got these 16 court cards, which is made up of a king, queen, a page, and what's the other? And a knight. Mm-hmm. And these all represent, they do represent figures of nobility. Certainly, back when the cards were developing, there was this reference to noble bodies. But they also have a direct reference to elements, you know, the 4 elements, which are key. They're also, with these court cards, they refer to personalities in particular. So it might refer to a personality within someone's life from an external source, or the personality of the person you're reading for. It depends on the question, and it depends where the card falls. But I find it fascinating that, you know, for example, a knight resonates with fire. So if a person gets a knight card, you know, there's instantly a fiery temperament going on there. Or if a person gets, I don't know, a queen card, for example, it's associated with water. So there might be an emotional nature to the person, or the person that the person's dealing with. There might be an emotional nature to the line of questioning, that kind of thing.
So speaking of the elements, is that directly relating to, say, I guess the astrological signs within a person's chart, or what they are, or just like generally like an aspect of their personality, just even without knowing the signs?
The astrological aspects do come into tarot, absolutely. They come through in, the major arcana and the minor arcana. So they come through in the 22 cards we were talking about before, but also the remaining cards. So
what's the difference between the major and the minor arcana? Sorry, I know I'm bombarding with questions, but I'm super interested in this. What's the difference?
Yeah, no problem.
Major and minor.
So the 22 major arcanas are the sort of overarching archetypes. So what's the best way to put this? They refer to, this Jungian aspect of cultural imprints, things that have developed throughout history that have kind of imprinted in what Carl Jung was referring to as the collective conscious. I think he was arguing that we have aspects of these archetypes within us, which can either affect us unconsciously or consciously, depending on how we resonate with them and how, I guess, clued up we are about archetypes. So the 22 majors are very much about these very powerful, inescapable aspects that we embody, whether we like it or not. So those are the majors.
Like death and those main ones? Is that
death,
major?
The tower, the moon, the star, the sun.
I hear you.
Etc.
Yes.
The full, these sort of pivotal aspects in one's life. These rites of passage. The minor arcana, they're referred to as small cards. I mean, talked about the 16 court cards. So you got the knight, king, queen, and page. Sometimes called the princess in the Crowley deck. So the page or the princess, they're interchangeable. But Crowley went for the more feminine princess, I think, to balance the masculine and feminine aspect of that, of the court cards. You've also got the 40 small cards. Some argue that these are the real minor arcana. And these are all cards that are divided into 4 different suits. So you've got the ones relating to fire, the element fire. You've got coins relating to earth, sometimes called pentacles or discs. You've got cups related to water or emotions. And I'm being very, very, what's the word here? Very general. So the way I'm describing them is very general. There's a lot more to them than the way I'm describing them. And then you've got swords, which are related to thoughts and the nature of thoughts. And sometimes the troublesome nature of thoughts and conflicts. Swords tend to be the most problematic suit when they come up in a person's reading. With the small cards. Yeah.
Yeah, in what way do swords do that? Because I'm pretty sure I had that one before, a while ago when I had a reading. I'm pretty sure that I think at least that came up. So why, in what way are they problematic?
Well, as you go through the sequence, with all these, with the 40 small cards, each suit is divided into 10. So you've got the ace to the 10, let's say, in the suit of swords. And if you lay them out in sequence, it tells a story. And with swords, the story seems to get worse and worse, just in terms of the visual. It seems to be the more swords that are involved in an image. Let's talk about number 9 and 10, for example, you've got in number 9 a person sitting up in bed like this, obviously plagued by difficult emotions, can't sleep at night, something's really bothering them, something's inhibiting their rest, inhibiting their decision making. And then the final card, number 10, it's basically a body with loads of swords stuck in it, bleeding out. Okay, so it's not always necessarily negative when a person gets swords in their reading, but it does warn of problems, conflicts, and perhaps it's trying to encourage that person to maybe take some time out and maybe become a bit more conscious of the fact that they're, I guess, not thinking clearly or thinking rationally, that they're letting their thoughts actually get the better of them. And this can also be in relationships as well. They might be in a very unhappy relationship where there's conflict with someone else. You've got to also remember a sword is a weapon. If a person's getting a lot of swords coming up in their reading, it could be that they're in conflict with someone, either with themselves or with a partner, with, I don't know, someone at work, something like this. So they generally don't, they don't look good in a person's reading. Generally, it depends on their position. And it depends on whether they're upright or inverted, if you're going to read that way. So, yeah, swords tend to be problematic.
Super interesting. And I guess that the way you could take this is to, I suppose, have a heads up, because I know that there's different lines of tarot that you do. You know, one is at least what I've had done before was you get one for the past, get a present, and then you get a future. I don't know if that's how you do it as well, but
yeah, loads.
I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I guess if it's one that's for the future, then that's at least a heads up that, hey, this is something in this area here where you could work on, correct?
Yeah, or it could be warning you that you're going to be up against some conflict. You're going to be up against a bit of hardship. Mm-hmm. Especially if the question is related to a relationship with someone. You know, how will my relationship look in the future, for example? You've got to realize a lot of questions people have are very similar, and a lot of them are very mundane.
Relationships.
And that's not to denigrate people. It's not to pour scorn on anyone, but a lot of the questioning is very much to do with relationships or jobs or families and stuff like that.
It's very interesting, man. I mean, relationships are a difficult one as well because they are so fluid. You know, because like you're constantly changing as a human being and improving and then changing different areas. Sometimes maybe not improving so much because like you say, you can fall in and out of enlightenment, but and then the same thing applies to your partner as well, you know, and then the two of you, you know, you can't cling on, but you can't distance yourself. You just have to coexist within this ever-flowing movement together. So on I suppose, a physical scale, like I can completely appreciate why a lot of people might have questions in those areas for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It can help you think outside the box a bit. Usually if a person's stuck in terms of moving forward or pushing something forward, it could be a business venture, it could be a partnership with someone. There's a hesitation, or a person doesn't quite know what move to make next. A tarot reading can just give a bit of a heads up. It can throw a bit of I guess a bit of creative brainstorming out there through images and through numerology. So it doesn't necessarily have to be looked upon as fortune telling, and it can just be a creative process where a person's just trying to think outside the box or come up with a new way of solving a problem.
Interesting. I see. I want one doing now, man.
Well, you're always welcome.
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Yeah, I find this super fascinating, and I think it's great that you're doing this, man. You know, it's something very unique, I would say, and of all of the people that I know, especially knowing yourself and what you do and what you've done, I wouldn't have normally imagined or guessed for you to be doing something like this, essentially for a living, right?
I wouldn't
And
say living. At the moment, it's
right,
you know, I do a few fairs here and there, and if a friend
sure,
wants a reading, you know, it's cool. Yeah, the making a living from it aspect is, yeah, I'm not really thinking like that at the moment. Um,
sure,
it's a very niche thing. I think there's a resurgence in it. There's certainly a lot more, you know, grifters involved in tarot reading. Um, you
hmm,
know, it's everyone's become a sort of overnight tarot reader recently, but
yeah,
I've been looking at this for, you know, about 6 years now, maybe longer, and it's there's always something you can learn from this, and the fact that it ties so many of the things that I was interested in anyway together, particularly the Kabbalistic stuff. It's a bit of a harder thing to penetrate, but once you start cracking it, it makes readings much more easier. It makes things flow a lot better. Um, the Kabbalistic aspects really do come in with the small cards, because you know you've got the numbers 1 to 10 or 8 to 10, which correspond with the Sephiroth and the spheres on the tree. And I just find that really interesting, how it emphasizes the nature of the spheres to some extent. Doesn't necessarily do them their full justice. It can be, you know, for example, if I give a really surface level reading of, you know, numbers 1 to 10 regarding the spheres, you've got number 1 seed, which corresponds with Kether. So this is you know, the initial seed of creation. Then you've
mhm,
got 2 energy, which corresponds with wisdom. Number 3 structure, which corresponds with Bina, understanding. 4 growth, which corresponds with Hesed, mercy, pillar of mercy. You've got 5 sorting, which corresponds with Jebra, also linked to power and severity. You've got 6, which is linked to balancing, Tiferet, harmony. And then you've got 7, which is results, in the sphere of Netzach, victory. And then you've got 8, which is to do with changing, corresponding with Hod, splendor. And then 9, ending, Yesod, the foundation. And then you've got 10, the fixing stage, which is Malkut, the kingdom. And these cards correspond with that directly, which I find really interesting. I find that can really actually help answer a person's question, even if the definitions of the spheres are very general and very surface. There's definitely something there. There's definitely a truth there that corresponds with the cards. So I think it's a system that can really, you know, make a reading more interesting and flow a bit better. Some people don't even reference Kabbalah at all. Some people are very good at just doing a general reading and doing their, you know, their own interpretation, which is fine. I just think there's a bit more depth for me to be exploring the Kabbalistic aspect.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, I had never heard the two put together in that way. Obviously, I'm familiar with Kabbalah, and it's interesting to see. Yeah, like you said, maybe it doesn't perfectly explain them, but there's definitely some correlation there. And it certainly makes me wonder. I mean, these things, there's got to be some kind of a, I guess, the general coding of the whole matrix that I think is connected in there. It's almost like a map of creation, if you
Yeah,
will.
map of the universe.
Yeah,
That's how it's often referred to.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
just I
that's
just like the system. It's a beautiful system. It's good storytelling. You know, the initial pangs of creation coming into solidity, solidifying into the kingdom. So I love the creative process of it, even if it is all bollocks. I resonate well with the storytelling of it. Let's put it that way.
absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, Kabbalah in itself is, and just the Jewish mysticism, is, I guess you could call it. It is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's almost too much for my brain to process, but I do have some basic understanding of it. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and claim to be a fucking, you know, like a you know, whatever, but it's certainly fascinating in how it sort of, I think Kabbalah is particularly good, and I can see how it works well with tarot reading, you know, because again, like you said, this is not always the case. That correlation isn't always there for a lot of people who do this, but I think it works particularly well because of its powerful connection to numerology and how that forms a very big part of it, you know, and taken from the very basic but by basic, I mean the very standard structure of just the tree of life, as you just went through it there, and I think that is fascinating, man. And yeah, it's there's a lot that like it. I almost feel, you know, like frustrated. Like I wish I knew more. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
but
always that feeling of like, God, you know, like you said, even if it's all bollocks, you still want to know it, right?
the thing is, it can appear very kind of intimidating initially when
Mm.
reading certain books on Kabbalah. It can almost feel like an information overload, but when integrating it with tarot, it becomes a lot more approachable, um,
Mm.
especially when you're reading material by people like Aleister Crowley, who've studied Kabbalah intimately and can decode it in a much more coherent way than I can anyway. Even if he is a bit cryptic here and there, that's just Crowley. But you've got to realize that people who developed, you know, these decks, or especially, you know, the White Smith deck I'm using in the Toth deck, there are roots in, you know, coming from Eliphas Levi, for example, who was very much aware and integral to, I guess, integrating this Kabbalistic aspect into tarot. And it developed in the Golden Dawn. I mean, the Golden Dawn, it was founded by 3 members of a Rosicrucian order. Can't remember the name of it exactly. But there was certainly a sort of, what can I say? A consolidation of all these elements coming together, certainly through the 1800s and, you know, early part of the 20th century. These Kabbalistic ideas and these Hermetic ideas really came into their own with the tarot. So, yeah, all these historical movements and these historical figures really helped it become what it is today. As for the origins, it's so mysterious where it actually came from. There are arguments that it came from the gypsies, of course, you know. There's certainly an argument to say it developed in Italy and Spain. And there certainly was a big trade in tarot and card games, that kind of thing. But it's difficult to actually know the origin. All I can say is that, you know, the development of it really took off and really consolidated in the sort of late 1800s and early part of the 20th century. And then you have Aleister Crowley, who commissioned his own deck in, I think, 1944, when he commissioned Frida Harris to actually paint it.
That's right.
Under his instruction. Yeah. And that's a fucking awesome deck. It's probably the most beautiful deck I've seen. But it's a tricky one to work with because it's extremely hermetic and extremely Kabbalistic. So if you don't really understand the essential ingredients that go into it, it's quite difficult to actually read with it.
I understand. I think, first of all, this is fucking great. You know, I really appreciate you talking about this, man. And I think, like, I'm trying to understand it in my own head as well, as you're explaining this. Obviously, there's a whole correlation there, which you explained, but I'm trying to bring it more into, I guess, for lack of a better word, normal, relatable terms of understanding it.
Sure.
And to me, I think it strikes me as a complex form of the same mechanism, or rather the same universal mechanism that goes into something like doing a coin toss, you know.
Yeah, in a sense, it's you're throwing a spread out there without any kind of any idea what's going to come up. It's for that person in front of you.
Yeah, and
so there is a very personal aspect to it. And as you were saying before, that there's a very interesting point you made about the law of karma, and how a card reading can be a reflection of a person's karma, what a person's going to be encountering in their life or bringing into their life. Without, it's interesting how you can tell a lot about a person without even meeting them or knowing them, just through a tarot reading.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is the thing that I was saying earlier as well, man, that, I made the whole thing of the case of the DNA traveling through, and the ancient semen that's traveled throughout all the time, and now it's alive, through, like, that's what we are, and it's got all of that attached to it. If you think of the universe and what it is, like, nothing comes and goes, in better terms, as we know, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply just changes formats. So if you just think of the world that we live in, you can think of it as the tip of an arrow, and then, let's say, some event, you want to call it the Big Bang or whatever, just pull this back, and then you let go, and ever since that moment, it's been moving non-stop. Like, as we know, the universe itself is ever expanding, and whatever the signs of life on this planet, it's been going non-stop, and that's what we are. We've not stopped yet. We're only going, and it's going over and over and over, and we're only headed forward, which is, I guess, the ultimate conclusion of it is perhaps somewhat unknown, but what we can take from it is the fact that, I guess, life is very valuable. And
in regards to that, sometimes you can be doing a reading all day. I did a few readings at Satanic Flea Market, and the amount of times I'd get the same cards coming up, they're completely different people, maybe 9 times at different, various different intervals. It wasn't necessarily every card reading simultaneously. It was just certain intervals. It'd be like, this fucker's got the same cards. This was a completely random shuffle. So in terms of the general psychic weather that was going on at the time, there seemed to be a correlation. There seemed to be, people had so much in common with regards to, their problems, what they wanted resolution for, all these types of things. So it is interesting when you're doing an all-day event like that and you get completely random people and the same shit keeps coming up.
There's something very interesting about that, which I can actually relate to, and it's in that, first of all, that is very interesting. that you would see that, and that on a specific day there's one thing that everyone seems to be focused on. One of the things that I noticed, I mean, in my previous workplace, without giving away what it was that I actually did, I would be dealing with a lot of people's data, essentially, where they would, when they would enter the building, they would have to give certain personal information, and this always included, obviously, their date of birth, right? And what was weird about it is you would have random days, and I noticed this dozens and dozens of times. It was fascinating, and I always said, like, why does this keep happening? Like, there's no explanation that is like, oh, it's just because we got a promotion on or whatever. But people would come in, and literally there would be days where half of every person that walked in there was like the same star sign. It was weird. It was like you would have a random day in April where like 60-70% of people who would come in were like, I don't know, Capricorn, for example. Right. Or maybe a bit less than 60-70, but it was like very noticeable. It's like, what the fuck is going on? Is there some kind of like a convention happening here? And none of those people had anything to do with each other. And I found those things very interesting. You find this a lot in life. I'm sure some people listening to this have had similar experiences, where it's like, I don't know, you might be working at, I don't know, like a cafeteria. And then one day, out of nowhere, everyone comes up and they order the same thing. And that thing is not marketed anywhere. It's not out there, but for whatever reason, that's just what people think. And that's a very interesting thing to me, that subconscious connection that kind of brings us all together. And like you put very well about the things that we all might have in common that we might not even know about, and how the universe, for lack of a better word, concentrates in these ways, which you have to look to be able to see it, but it is
you need
there.
To scratch beneath the surface a bit, which is why I find, I guess, the occult world so interesting. It's just a shame that at the moment there is a lunatic fringe out there that sees anything to do with the occult as, somehow associated with some massive Masonic conspiracy or whatever. I'm not saying that there aren't sinister conspiracies going on. There certainly are, but to blanket all involvement in the occult or masonry as evil and conspiring to do this and that, I think it's very lazy thinking. And there's a hell of a lot, even in Freemasonry, which is really fascinating. A lot of fucking tarot reading comes from Freemasonry. A lot of Kabbalistic thought is developed by Freemasonry. So it's not all bad, you know what I mean?
Define bad, right?
Yeah.
What is bad, exactly. Especially in this context? We have no fucking idea. I mean, you can look at things on the surface again, but just in this particular context, when you put things in the long term, then try to judge the good and bad. You know what I mean? And even what is the long term? We've only got infinity ahead of us, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but you were
just saying that it's interesting to scratch beneath the surface, and especially when it comes to the occult. And just, I suppose the point you were trying to make was that deeper understanding there is that we can take of these things, and that the occult isn't always necessarily going to be intertwined with masonry.
Yeah, and
although it can be.
Yeah, sure. And also, there's masonry and masonry. There are people who are in it for genuine reasons for self-development. And then there's this far more capitalistic aspect, which is a boys' club, doing favors for the boys. Don't deny that this is happening, but, it's not everything everyone thinks it is. A lot of these old societies, like the Golden Dawn, massive Freemasonic involvement with that. In fact, I think it was only high-ranking Freemasons that could join the Golden Dawn at one stage. I might have that wrong, but from what I've read, that seems to be the case.
No, I think, at least as far as I know as well, that is correct.
So I think, Masonry's certainly given a hell of a lot to certainly modern Western occultism. I think it's definitely gifted us with a lot of very interesting stuff. So
I always find it interesting, man. I mean, that's a whole sort of rabbit hole of its own, really. And
it is,
and then obviously,
we don't have
and
to.
then obviously, no,
I think it's just important to highlight it, because people are so, people on this whole conspiracy side. I agree with some of it, but a lot of it is just lunatic, kind of lunatic thinking. It's not even thinking. A lot of it's just, I saw this on an internet clip and someone edited it together really cleverly, and now I'm convinced that these people are the bad guys.
There's a lot of, what, as much as I guess a lot of my own ideologies would land on the conspiracy theory side of things, I also, I'm not that fucking stupid, you look at some shit on TikTok, again, we're coming back to the wholesale ideology that I said, it's that I don't think that the vaccines are a good idea. So, that shouldn't automatically mean that you now think that the whole earth is flat, But this is another thing as well, for me,
exactly,
these things, like the earth is flat, there's lizard people controlling us. I have the way I process that information is my immediate response, of course, in my head is like, oh, that sounds fucking stupid. But then I'm like, okay, why do you think that? I always come to that, it's like I hate just doubting something, you know what I mean? Because it's like, if we thought more that way, at least with an open mind, yes.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and I think if we just thought with more of an open mind on these things, a lot of things in life, I think, would simply just be, there would be a lot of truth that wouldn't have slipped under our radar throughout this time.
Yeah, I think it is interesting stuff. Some of the stuff in the whole conspiracy sphere, which does, merit a bit of investigation. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction to things that people don't fully understand, and massive judgments made about, maybe people who are following an esoteric path. It's almost leading to a witch hunt to some extent. When you start pointing the finger at people involved in, I don't know, I guess secret societies or something that might be a bit kind of underground, not perhaps fully accepted by normal society, you can end up with, a very dangerous situation where people are unfairly persecuted when they're not actually doing any harm to anyone.
But I don't think that many people, I mean, particularly if we're just talking about the Masonic aspect of things, and then obviously there's the whole topic of the alleged, I guess, Illuminati that you can get into. That's the first time I've said that word on this podcast. Very impressive. That's, I think, I don't think there's any persecutions as such, really. I actually think that if you observe modern media and things, especially in like music videos and stuff, like, a lot of times I think they're genuinely just fucking around with ideas, and it's just fashion, and it's just fetishism of these things. But some other times as well, you look at something and kind of go, that's a bit,
when you start seeing the same symbols being used over and over and over again, it does seem a bit odd.
Yeah.
Like there is something which is trying to be communicated symbolically. So this kind of stuff does come up a lot, particularly with celebrities. whether it's, you know, flashing the one eye sign or whatever. It's interesting. I'm not jumping to any conclusions about what they might be saying or might not be saying, but it does warrant a bit of attention. It does warrant perhaps a bit of inquiry, especially when, you know, celebrities are doing it one after another.
Yeah, for sure.
What I mean?
And again, there's always this idea of, because there's always, like you said, there's gonna be a lunatic out there. There's some. I mean, I don't even. This is gonna sound fucking crazy, but I don't even mind Christian people that much. Not anymore. I feel like Christians have actually, like, as stupid as some of them fucking can be, they've actually, I feel like they've been on the better side of things, particularly in the last year or two. But there's also a lot of them that they just like sit on TikTok and then they watch these things and they're like, oh, these fucking demon worshiping, like pop artists, and this is, I think that there is actual truth to some of these things, but I also think that, like you said, the lunacy of it all and the conspiracy theories also muddy the waters for the actual truth that might be there, But it would certainly be interesting to hear conversations and dialogues, creative dialogues that happen between people who come up with the creative processes. I mean, I'll make an example. I mean, I know this is really a weird example, probably considering the underground metal background that we've got, but I remember maybe about 10 years ago, there was a release by, I think, was it Katy Perry? I think she released a song called, I think it was The Dark Horse or something like that. I remember watching that at the time and thinking like, what the fuck is going on here? Like there was a lot of, and that was just me back then, and I was probably on a lot of psychedelics, and I remember thinking like, oh, what's going on here? Is this some kind of weird messaging happening, or what is this, or maybe it's not, because you also know that there's a lot of times that people do support these things, people start using like the triangle and the eye and whatever, and they don't fucking go anywhere, it's just like, it's not, just because you use that doesn't necessarily mean anything's going to happen, so I think there's a lot of very interesting things about our world, which I'm very, very open-minded. I'm open-minded to the maddest fucking shit there is that could actually describe and define the truth of the reality of the simulation that we live in. But I also, I proceed somewhat grounded in the sense that, some things are bullshit and some other things might not be, and it's not always, maybe the truth is maybe not always as romantic as you might think it is, but in certain other aspects perhaps it could be. You know what I mean? I'm kind of floating in,
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I think the key is not to necessarily outright dismiss things, but to always have a skeptical eye when it comes to, weighing things up. Don't necessarily like this knee-jerk jump into conclusions aspect of, seeing, I don't know, a celebrity who's maybe following a certain path and just instantly saying, oh, they're sacrificing babies or something. I think it's it's a bit mental. You know what I mean?
I think you put it very well. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah.
But I think, just generally, we don't really know fully what's going on when it comes to, this higher society, this, I guess, this exclusive society of celebrities, politicians, etc. It's a safe bet to assume it's corrupt at its very core, and it doesn't have our best interest at heart. But beyond that, it's very difficult to know exactly what the fuck is going on.
No, that's very true. You hit the nail on the head, man, when you said that, just rather than outright dismissing anything and everything, just that's not really the best way of doing it, because you might end up brushing aside something that is actually true. And another creepy thing about it, and this is like a whole different conversation, but hear me out. What even is the truth? What if that alone is something that can be bent? Because if you have means of bending time and space, maybe you can also bend the truth, which is how you get, I suppose, interdimensional child molesters, as Alex Jones says. But
well, there's that whole argument of putting karmic return on, I guess, on the unsuspecting victim, so the perpetrator doesn't actually have to reap what they've sown. So the person they've made to do something actually does the reaping. Right. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you use the power of suggestion to get someone to do something, but you haven't actually done it, and you've persuaded that person to do it through word spells over and over again, then do you get the karmic return, or do they get it? I've heard that argument a lot, particularly in regards to, I guess, the black magical aspect to the whole COVID narrative.
Yeah, sure.
I've heard that argument. Interesting one. Certainly an interesting one.
Absolutely. I had my good friend Giuseppe from the band Fetus Inversa from Italy. I had him on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he actually made a really good point, which I was like, I never thought of this way before. And he said, what kind of a fucking egregore did we feed by thinking that COVID is going to be the end of the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that goes perfectly with what you just said now as well. It's just, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's certainly a massive paradigm shift, and the world, well, it won't be the same. It isn't the same. There is no going back to normal. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad in the future. It just means we're at a pivotal time where it could go any which way, but we can't go back to how we were, because too much has changed. There's been too much exposure. People have exposure. Certain types of people have been exposed for what they are, and certain systems have been exposed for what they truly are. So there's no going back from that.
Well, I think it's the whole thing of the age of Aquarius, right? I mean, we entered it in 2012, which, as they said, was going to be the end of the world. And I mean, in a matter of speaking, it was, because
I prefer the term apocalypse.
Yeah.
The term apocalypse, I think, is more accurate, because it literally translates as unveiling and seeing things as they truly are. So it's no bad thing necessarily. It just depends what you do with that unveiling as an individual and as a collective.
Yeah, that's correct. And obviously Aquarius, as we know, is quite revolutionary as far as the characteristics are concerned. And I think that's and quite free. And there's not a lot of room for bullshit anymore.
Yeah, there are more clear lines of communication. It's very much about communicating clearly with Aquarius.
Absolutely.
At least idealistically, anyway. I think we still have some time to go with that, but we'll see how it unravels. It's a very exciting time to be alive, actually.
I think so too, man. Yeah, I feel this way. Like there's this impending terror that you can always feel sometimes. But I'm with you. Like I am. I say this with no censorship. I am the happiest I've ever been, just to be alive, just to be fucking breathing. Like some days I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm here. And I love that. That makes me feel fucking great. And it just the fact that it makes me feel alone, that's great. And I'm fucking grateful for it, and I'm full of passion and lust for life. Because I was like, fuck. It's like our good friend Bez, he said a very good analogy some years ago where he was like, in life, you're like the dog, hungry, stuck to a fucking shoe, and you're not fucking letting go of it. And I was like, yes, I
Very
feel
good.
that now.
Yeah, yeah.
you
Yeah, I
know,
can resonate with that. Yeah. That's why I think, we're talking earlier about training and, putting the body through hardship. That makes life better, I reckon.
yeah, I
It,
think it makes you earn life. That's why it's better.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it has an antidepressive effect. I think, if anyone's struggling with depression, they've really got to reflect on their lifestyle. I'm not saying everyone's to blame, but you do have to look at yourself in a holistic way and think, am I getting enough exercise? Am I eating right? Am I doing all the things that could make my general well-being better? And a lot of people I know who are depressed or struggling with their weight or whatever, they're not moving. They're not active.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So there definitely seems to be a correlation there, cause and effect, right? It's a good time to be moving because no one's coming to fucking save you. The pharmaceutical industry is not coming to save you. You can empower yourself. So I think it's a good time to, learn that these institutions don't really have your best interests, and you're the one who should have your best interests at heart. You're your life's work, essentially. So why not improve
Absolutely.
yourself?
Fuck yeah, man. Absolutely. And look, I've been on the other side of it. I know what it's like to be walking around at fucking what I was like 19 stone. That's what I used to weigh, man. And obviously I'm 12 stones now, and on top of it, I've built quite a bit of muscle too.
It's a
And
fucking amazing story, man. Like, hats off to you.
thank you,
It's a
thank you so
big
much.
achievement.
I'm a different person, like what I just said a moment ago, you would have never heard me say that back in 2017, for example.
Right.
Never. And it's changed things around, and it's not the only thing. But how earlier I was saying that, just to round things up as well, how I was saying that we've got all of this knowledge and information buried within us, and there are ways of like getting these keys that open this information boxes that are already inside us. Yes, there's psychedelics, there's a lot of different methods. There's meditation, breathing is huge. But one of the yeah one of the first basic things that you could do to open those information boxes is exercise, because you're built to do that. You're not built to fucking sit around in a fucking cubicle surrounded by fucking artificial lights doing bullshit fucking Excel folders and pretending to be friendly on the phone, And I get it. Listen, I don't say this in a judgmental way. We all have to do it. I still have to do it from time to time, but that is not what defines us. And this is where you have to add things to your own life. And to the point of what we said earlier, embrace the Saturnalian nature of things, to embrace the suffering and to just fucking move your ass. Yeah, it feels a lot better. It feels a lot better when you do, man. There's nothing beats. Yeah. Nothing beats having a good session, and then when you leave the gym, when you're in there, it's intense, but when you leave, that's a good feeling, man.
I think any kind of hardship ritual that you incorporate into your life. I mean, it used to be for me doing the ayahuasca. I'd sort of go every once or twice a year to do it, and the feeling of satisfaction after was incredible. Sure, it might have thrown up more confusion. Sorry, and may have thrown up more questions than it did answer direct questions or come to any sort of set conclusions, but the fact that I'd actually gone through it and survived it always gave me a lot of satisfaction. But these days, yeah, it's mainly all about training, moving my ass, getting out there, moving the body, doing breath work. And also it's good to share these experiences with other people. It's always good to train with other people. And also do psychedelics and things like that with other people. You can learn so much about yourself when you do it with someone else, what you're capable of. So if you've got a person there pushing you to go further, whether it's adding on more weight, doing more reps, whatever it is, you wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for that person. So it's always good to have, camaraderie in your life and, strong friends, strong partnerships, people who can actually push you forward. Just never underestimate it.
Absolutely, man. Fucking 100%. And we absolutely have to do all of those things together at some point, by the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We will.
Awesome. Ro, how would you feel if I were to tell you that just as we round this up, we have just done the longest episode yet on Iblis Manifestations?
Okay, fucking hell. That was a very good conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Honestly, man, it's my absolute pleasure. I fucking really enjoyed having you on. And I feel like with our style of thinking, we can probably talk for days and it'd probably go by like a breeze.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And we barely even talked about music, right?
Yeah, well, there's plenty of time for that.
There's plenty of time for that. I think this is why I like to do this podcast, man, is because we get the chance to talk about we can talk about music too if we want, but there's a lot of very interesting stuff there, and I see no need to be contained by any one thing, and this is why I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to a lot of people, but someone like yourself, you have a very interesting journey, man, and I learned a lot from chatting to you. So thank you so much for jumping on. Is there anything that you would like to share with people? Anyway, they can come and check out your work. You've got your tarot business as well, correct?
Sure, yeah. I've got a website. It's caduceusreadings.co.uk. If you feel like a tarot reading, if you have a certain question, just hit me up and I'll get back to you. Be happy to read for you.
Fantastic, man. We will have to. I would love to get that one done for myself as well at some point. Would be great. So I'll link the website in the description of the episode anyway. So whether it's on Spotify or YouTube, people can just go click on it, rather than have to manually type it in. Just a bit of convenience to find yourself. So Ro, absolute fucking pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for jumping on. And to everyone listening to the podcast, if you made it this far to the end of the longest episode yet on Iblis Manifestations, thank you very much for listening. And I hope that you guys enjoyed the episode. And stay tuned. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.